Okay, it's 1 past, so I think we'll get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Hagen, and I will be conducting the lecture tonight on the evolution of 00 fleet warfare. I'll shortly describe who I am. I am a original beta tester of EVE-Online. I joined in beta 6, I believe it was, back in 03. I have been part of the 00 Alliance Warfare since 06, where I restarted playing EVE-Online. I have since then I have been part of the high command of several large alliances, including a very short stint in Mossos Mihi. Okay, this class is broken up into 4 parts. I will first give a short introduction into how Alliance Warfare started. I'll then go over the current trends of EVE-Online and what we see out in 00 combat, and then I will do a chronological walkthrough of the EVE-Online expansions, what they introduced in the new ships and game mechanics, and how that changed the combat environment in 00. I will then open up the floor for a prolonged Q&A session. We'll see how long that lasts. Please keep all questions to the class E-UNI channel, and I'll try and keep a good eye on any questions that will arise. Okay. Fleet warfare. Fleet warfare, as we see it now, is nothing like it was back in the really old days when 00 was first invented and implemented into the Tranquility server. A small gang in these days was the epitome of fleet warfare back then. If you could gather 10 guys, you had a very large fleet and could pretty much dominate anything you met. And these days, you see fleets of up to 2,000 people, although that won't be very playable. So, when the corporations first started conquering the EVE-00 landscape, there was no mechanic for intercorporation cooperation. It was basically there only existed corporations. So because of that, it was very hard to assemble what we would call fleets today. And it was player organizations that assembled despite of the in-game mechanics that forced CCP to actually develop what we know as the alliance system today. And it evolved as a direct response to a very few, very highly skilled corporations that was simply outmatching every other corporation out there. So the only way they could counter them was to start the intercorporation cooperation, thus forcing CCP to implement the alliances. Now, these days, we have seen since the implementation of the previous expansion, Dominion, is a stabilization in fleet builds. But, since then, that was last December, I believe. These days, we have returned to a sub-capital dominated playing field in the sense that Titans are completely unusable against a normal fleet of sub-capitals. Sub-capitals once again have reign of the battlefield until the point that carrier fleets are introduced, and then there's counter to that, of course. But mainly we see roaming fleets of drakes supported by shield weapons, and the counter to that being armor hack teams with armor weapons or abaddon teams. This development is a direct cause of the changes brought about by the Titan nerf and the Apocrypha probing system. So I think I'll start going through the past expansions and what they actually changed. The most important change, as I see it, regarding the change of the fleet makeup in 00 Alliance Warfare was Red Moon Rising back in December of 2005. That introduced interdictors, carriers, motherships, and Titans. And this was the original Titans. Titans that could remote doomsday from a different system. They would simply warp in a Sino frigate, open up a Sino, and the Titan would sit many systems away and just remotely send through a doomsday weapon that would deal upwards of 70,000 damage to everyone instantly. And it was so difficult to build Titans those days that it took nearly a year before there was even a handful of them. They were so expensive and it was so problematic to build that it actually became a running joke between the players that it was a completely useless ship because it was so expensive, it was so difficult to protect, and the circumstances to bring it into combat was also very difficult. I'll quickly throw up a link from that year's EVE meet in November of 2006. And it came to a point where during a Q&A session with CCP during the I forget what the meetup with CCP is called. Anybody got the name? Yeah, brain freeze. Thank you, FanFest. Players openly asked, "What is the point of Titans?" And CCP's response was, "They have no purpose. It's just a giant E-peen. It's a dick." And then the ball really got rolling. CCP intended it as a mere showcase piece. They would never see much introductions into the populace, but then they started dropping. Not fast, but they did. But this was also a time where the only way to actually catch a ship in 00 was via interdictor bubbles. And with the old probing system, that was exceedingly difficult. Not just because of the probing system, but also because of the vulnerability of an interdictor. If an interdictor warped in on a Titan, he would simply doomsday and warp out safely. Or they would see the probes on grid, doomsday, and then get out before he could even get a location of the Titan. So that changed the fleet makeup from the old school pre-Red Moon Rising fleets of pure sniper battleships. Battleships fitted to shoot out to at least 180 kilometers, and more often in the case of the old Bob Alliance, 220. It was basically two fleets landing, one fleet jumping into the other, being at least 180 kilometers from each other, and then just changing blows. And as soon as you were targeted, you warped off safely and came back and hopefully killed the other guys before they could warp out. But then the next thing I'll try to point out is the use of motherships in the pre-heavy interdictor phase of Tranquility. Motherships as Titans would fit at least one, preferably two officer smart bombs, so they could always get away from a interdictor bubble, so they will all be safe. That led to the alliance called the Mercenary Coalition, devising a tactic that exclusively built upon the use of multiple motherships. And this was very, very rare those days. These days you see easily groups of 15, 20 motherships. But in those days, if you even had one or two motherships, that was really a lot, and a huge force multiplier. And in a very well-known campaign in 2007, the Mercenary Coalition, a very small alliance, even then, or not, at least medium-sized then, were given the task by the Band of Brothers Alliance to disrupt their opponents in the what we now know as the Northern Coalition. They did this by simply supplementing a normal sub-capital fleet with 4 motherships, and this is the result. I'll show you. The first picture is a link to a sovereignty map of March 2007. Now what you're looking at is you're looking at the top left corner. One second. If you zoom in, you'll see in the top left corner Dusk and Dawn Alliance, Freelancer Alliance, Imperial Republic of the North, and Race Alliance, and they control 6 regions in the Galactic North. But with the assistance of the motherships in their fleets, they reached after 3.5 months of combat the situation we see in the second screenshot. And this was, as Yakuma writes, this is huge change, even in today's standards. 6 entire 00 regions changing hands because one group of 500 pilots with 4 or 5 active motherships in each fleet managed to dislodge a group of players that was at least 5 times as large, if not more, simply because they had the resources to produce these very expensive ships, which they really were at that time. If I'm breaking up, please let me know, but I do also stutter sometimes. Okay, I'll try to be a bit more clear. Okay. So with more than a year gone by since the introduction of motherships and Titans, and this very fine example of how broken the balance of EVE Online was at the time, CCP saw they had to do something. It even took it took more than a year since the first mothership was built till actually the first one was killed. They were just exceedingly difficult to hold down. The only time reliably was to camp all your own motherships next to one and bump him indefinitely so he couldn't warp off. That was basically it. And you needed at least a handful of interdictors on top of him all the time to prevent him from jumping out. I'm not sure if everyone knows, but motherships are immune to any kind of electronic warfare. You can't point them, you can't scram them, you can't web them. So they are they were very difficult to keep in place. And yes, Yakuma, Dusk and Dawn did completely disband as a result of the MC advance on their territory. They did reform into several other alliances, but that is the nature of EVE. Okay, this was from March to June in 2007. Then CCP realized something had to be done, so in the Trinity expansion of December 2007, they introduced the heavy interdictor. And the days of the unrestricted super capital warfare was over. Now everyone could be caught at any time by these heavy interdictors. It still wouldn't be easy, but it wouldn't be completely risk-free as it had been. Another thing that Trinity also introduced was the jump freighter, and you might not think it because it's a hauling ship, but that is one of the ships that had the largest impact on 00 warfare. With the jump freighter, you could now, at any point in time, at any place in 00 space, get instant supplies from high-sec or GSA even with very little risk. Before that time, if you needed any resources from high-sec, you needed to form a very large escort operations to even get them out there, and so everything you brought out to 00, you absolutely needed out there, and it was something you couldn't or wouldn't invest resources and time into producing out there yourself. I remember spending many hours escorting freighter ops with 100 pilots in them just to get 10 jumps into 00. It also meant that super capitals like Titans could be built with resources from HiSec instead of having to mine it all. So this caused an explosion in Mothership and Titan production, because now you didn't need actual miners in 0-0 mining all the titanium and all the other small low-level materials. I'm not entirely sure, but I also believe that with Trinity they nerfed the remote doomsday, so on the Titan, so that you now had to actually be on grid with the Titan to actually engage the doomsday. If it wasn't Trinity, it was very close to Trinity. Don't hang me up on the details on that exact. I couldn't find the dates myself. This stabilized the situation a bit, to the extent that you no longer saw the motherships roaming around too freely, and but it didn't change the Titan situation too much, because all you did now was you warped in 3 Titans instead of 1, and you were sure also to get the heavy interdictors as well. But it did change it somehow, but. So what CCP did was that 1.5 years later, with the Apocrypha expansion, they introduced a new way of probing. Probing was apparently too boring and too time-consuming for the other players in EVE, so they determined that now you only needed a 5-second probe to actually find a target. This meant that you could no longer at all engage in sniping battles. You would anytime you lined up your sniping battleships, you would get probed down. Interdictors and heavy interdictors would land, and your entire fleet would be wiped out, even by a comparatively weaker fleet. And yes, it was the death of hybrids. But still, fleets still have to go out. You still needed a large number of people to secure your capital ships when you were sieging enemy posses and the like. So you needed your sub-capital fleet out there, but you also needed them to survive Doomsday or completely avoid getting hit by one. So it was either light skirmishing fleets, nano fleets if you want, or heavily tanked battleship groups designed to survive at least one, but preferably 2 doomsdays. And you only jumped into the enemy system if you knew there wasn't a Titan waiting for you. It became very frustrating to fly in fleets when you knew an enemy Titan pilot was logged on in the target system. It became more akin to the words escaped me. Trench warfare. There we go. Trench warfare, where it was a matter of either you clogged up the system so the enemy couldn't get in to begin with, or you simply threw enough people at the Titans to make sure that you would get through. it became very boring unless you had some very intelligent people leading the fleets and a very good spy network to avoid actually getting doomsdayed. The cycle time on a Titan Doomsday was 1 hour. The old area of effect Doomsday. So all you needed to do one every 10 minutes was you just had 6 of them in one system. Yes, you could bait a Doomsday out and then try to slip through, and that was also done extensively. But still, when you jump in 50 people, 100 people, 500 people, the system will lag. There's a very great chance that the Titan will land on grid and Doomsday before your guys actually get through. And also there's the warp disrupting bubbles to take into account, which they usually used loads of in systems you knew the enemy were coming through. If the enemy hits your posts one day, then you know they'll come again tomorrow, so you set up 8 or 9 or sometimes 17 large mobile disruption bubbles. So they need to get to either get outside of that 100-kilometer bubble or shoot them all before they can warp off, which is more than enough time for 1 or 5 Titans to land on grid. I'd just like to remind everyone, this is my my view on the affairs. I know there were definitely other types of fleet out there. If you go out in 00 today, there'll still be a very great difference in the fleet makeup depending on the region of space you go to. But I'm trying to just show the bare essentials, the glimpse at what was Alliance warfare and is. Anyway, moving on from the new probing system, the one we have today. So Titans were still a big problem, and the Dooms, even though they had claimed that they were just giant E-Peens, CCP saw that something needed to be done in order to change up the events in 00 space. What they did was they changed the Titan Doomsday to a directed single target Doomsday that we see today. So no longer could you simply put in six Titan pilots in your system and bubble it up and be sure that nothing could actually get through. Now, you remove Titans, you remove mothership blobs as they were, and you'd expect that now we'll return to sniper warfare fleets with battleships, but no. Now the more important thing was that the probing system was still and is still a very quick thing to do compared to the old days when sniper fleets ruled. So after Dominion with the Titan nerf, we didn't see a return to sniping battleships as some had predicted, but instead to what we see today with large groups of seemingly not that very effective fleets. Drakes, for example, Drakes was a standing joke in 00 space from creation. they were useless. They no damage. You can't use them. But they were what I used were found. That's certain, and that's why we see them out there today. It went from a very thank you, Divine Shadow. You put a. I should be telling you this. Why did people, corps and players, live in 0-0? Well, I'm sure there are more reasons than I'm aware of, but one of them was the incredible resource richness of 0-0 space. Not only were there bigger bounties on the rats out there, but the ABC asteroids were incredibly expensive. You couldn't get the resources in high-sec. Almost nothing of ABC typeroids were available, and the only thing you can get from them were from loot. Crokite, Bistot, and Arconor, Audrey. And a newbie in an Osprey could mine 40, 50 million ISK worths of ore an hour. It was incredibly wealthy space. A one-month-old character could easily earn that much. There was also the 10 plexes, which respawned in the same system, in the same place every day, and provided 1 billion ISK worth of loot every day. And that was one of the major focal points of conflict in the old 0-0 space. No, Kratana. With the implementation of the drone regions and the increasing of the population and introduction of mining barges, the amount of ore you could produce has been exceptionally increased compared to the old days. I remember mining ups where the best ship you could use was an Apocalypse. That was the best ship for mining. The 10 plexes still exist, but were removed as permanent plexes in the same system that respawned every day, and were instead changed to an instance you had to probe for, and that you had to find first. It was randomly generated in a constellation, I believe. I'm not entirely sure. My probing experience is old. I can't guarantee it's the later side. Okay then, but we've now come to 2010 and the Tyrannus expansion. And what we saw with Tyrannus was that they introduced fighter bombers because motherships had become irrelevant. They were useless, claimed all their pilots, and in a sense they were correct, at least in regards to what they had been. But the consequences of introducing the fighter bombers were, I think, a bit not what the CCP predicted. So what we saw since Tyrannus in May of last year now were groups of alliances, even small alliances, capable of fielding 20 or more motherships in a group. That is 20 ships with 20 million effective hit points that can't be scrambled, can't be webbed, can't be jammed by ECM in a completely secure spider wrapping setup. Extremely difficult to destroy. So whenever a small or medium-sized capital fleet came onto the field, you would simply drop 20 motherships on them, and you would have almost no way of doing anything about it unless you yourself had 20 motherships ready to go. Now, that doesn't mean that motherships can kill anything, or is good at killing anything, but anything of battleship or larger size is or was very vulnerable, and especially the new thing to fight over in 0-0 when it comes to sovereignty, the TCUs. They could be killed extremely quickly by a mothership blob. So you often didn't need a support fleet to even engage them. So fighter bombers had made motherships too dangerous. So what do we see in Incursion 2010 in November? And nerf to fighter bombers. While they haven't made the motherships irrelevant, but they have made them less dangerous to sub-capitals and thus vulnerable to a sub-capital fleet in large engagements. They are still out there today, along with the Drake fleets, the Armor Hack fleets, and the Abaddon fleets. But it is very dangerous to field capital fleets, knowing that even small alliances, especially small alliances with very rich players, can field these very large blobs of motherships. In my previous alliance, the Cry Havoc, we were able to field upwards of 30 to 40 motherships if in an organization of maybe 100 active pilots. An extreme concentration of power. A mothership is a more heavily armored E-War immune carrier that can field 20 fighters instead of 10 from a carrier, and use fighter bombers. Which a Nix super carrier with fighter bombers can do 20,000 DPS. I believe I calculated last time. Yeah, that is a lot. Yes, there is one mom that is better than everyone else, and that is the Nix, the Galenti mothership, because of the 5% bonus to damage output by fighters and fighter bombers. So that was a short rundown of the changes in game mechanics and ships in EVE Online for the last 5 years or so. The largest changes in EVE history, in my mind, would be the introduction of capital ships, carriers, dreads, moms, and titans. Another one would be the speed nerf. I'm not sure new players are aware of this, but in 2006, 2007, ships were extremely fast. I think the speed record was set by an interceptor going, the MR interceptor going 67 kilometers a second. Yeah, that was a bit fast, and CCP, yeah, 67. At that time, when you saw roaming fleets in 0-0 space, that is small fleets of maybe 5 to 10 people, they would be flying something like a nano typhoon that could go between 8 and 12, sometimes 15 if it was a really good pilot, kilometers a second. So they would circle a target or group of targets going at 10 plus kilometers a second and spam missiles at you. So they would have perfect targeting because they didn't need targeting for missiles, and you would be sitting still or going at least very much slower than them, and it couldn't really do much about it. And that was with the old probing system, so you couldn't get on top of them, and even if you could, you would land 30 kilometers behind them when you finally did land. Katana grids have not changed in size at all, but the mechanics of grids and grid sizes is a class in itself. They can be manipulated, and they can be enlarged to extremely large grids. Yeah, yeah. Back then, before the speed nerf, there was no stacking penalty on all the agility and speed mods. So it was quite easy to get high speeds. Another very big change in EVE was the wormhole update, which just allowed small alliances or even corporations to start getting 0-0 like content with high income. And open up a whole new category of PvE and PvP content, which is actually quite fun. Number 4 of my group of 5 things that changed the EVE history was the Dominion 0-0 sovereignty update, which quite truly completely screwed over a large number of alliances. It slowed down alliance warfare to an actual crawl, and forced small alliances to either join another group of alliances as a pet, to pay for the privilege of being in 0-0, or become nomads or having to leave. The reason it slowed down was that instead of attacking bosses and bashing them every day, which was truly mind-numbingly stupid, they just moved it to the TCU mechanic, which is clearly just the same but worse. And the last of my 5 things that have changed the game significantly is the Super Capital update, which managed to break huge areas of the EVE 0-0 space, I am not actually sure which of the updates of the expansions it was, but because of the Doomsday device's damage, they increased the effective hit points of all capitals by a very large degree. I believe it was actually possible to before the update, it was possible for 2 or 3 Titans with the direct damage Doomsday that we use now to one-shot a mothership. But there was a large swathe, my English is weak, of patches for the Super Capital update, which actually made the whole situation worse. They updated the HP, as I said, and they rushed a lot of fixes to things that didn't need fixes, and were too slow to realize that Titan Doomsday in low sec was a very bad idea. And the last of those Super Capital updates was the unforeseen lag that was created when using fighters and fighter bombers. Yes, there is a very good reason why I don't mention dreads, and that is because after the let me see which expansion it was. Yeah, after Apocrypha with the new probing system, it is simply too easy to land a interdictors on a group of dreadnoughts that are stuck in their 10-minute cycles and kill them outright with very little chance for them to actually fight back. Unlike a Titan or a mothership or a carrier, unless they are in triage, the dreadnoughts are stuck in space, can't move, can't warp out, can't jump out for 10 whole minutes. That is a long time in 0-0 space. Yes. Well, once they changed the mechanic away from posses, where previously you needed to kill 20 posses in every system you wanted to conquer, you still needed dreads. But once they changed it to TCUs, there's only one place you need to be. You didn't need the dreads there. Dreads are still useful, sure, but having you need to be confident that you can control the entire system for those 10 minutes. It is a dangerous procedure to field dreadnoughts. There are alliances out there, small alliances, very elite alliances, who only they won't be happy to find or run upon a group of hostile capitals engaging a pause. They don't even have to dislike the guys, and they'll just land 10 motherships on the Dread fleet just because they can. Because a capital kill is a capital kill. Precisely, Yakuma. There's a strong link to our own history. Let me just see if I covered most of the things I wanted to. Yeah, I didn't directly touch on the what I call the cyclical nature of the EVE meta game, but I hope you can see the causes of CCP's changes needing more patches to do the same thing that it didn't actually fixed the first time. We see it especially with something like the motherships. Four expansions in the course of as many years have all changed motherships, yet they still need to be fixed. I don't know that there is a fix, but I do know that I believe, at least, I'm not sure some alliances like Pandemic Legion would agree with me, but I don't believe that it should be possible for a group of 20 people, just because they are rich, to be able to dominate groups of 200, 500 people, just because they can't afford the same ship. I do not feel that is the kind of game that CCP envisioned or want EVE Online to be. Having an advantage, sure, we should allow that, and that is part of the game. But an advantage that where one person is more valuable than 20, that is an extreme difference in power. Which is also the reason why I sold my Nyx and my Nyx character. Anyway, I think I've come to the end of what I had planned to talk about. There is a lot more to discuss in these areas, and it was only meant as a short look at what it is CCP is doing with this game, and how the events of the last many years have affected the gameplay. If you have questions, now will be the time to ask them. No, I did not discuss Dust and PU. No, that was not in the scope of this class. I'm sorry. If you have comments about my performance in the class, I would be very appreciative if you could write a short sentence or two and send it to me in an email or something. Okay, questions. Croissant, as to tweaks, that is a very broad subject. One would actually have an entire or two classes about just what can be fixed, how can it be fixed. So it's hard to go into here, but there are very important things that need to be fixed for this game to become more entertaining while still retaining the many of the features that we have today. I'm a proponent of the large fleet fights where everybody can have a role and be a part of the game and have an actual influence in the outcome of the battle. That is my main focus for change in EVE, and something I hope I can help point out to CCP and the people helping develop them. Regarding sniper fleets, yes, they are still used, but it is extremely rare. A place it could be used is in defending posses in low sec, where it's impossible to force a fight by using bubbles and interdictors. It lost popularity because you could be broke down in less than 10 seconds, and all of your fleet would be caught in a interdictor bubble, and you would all die. Yes, sad but true. Hunara asked about the E-War immunity, and no, it is not just the Nix, it is every single mothership class ship and Titan that is immune to E-War. Megachrome asked about the scan time, and earlier the best scan time you could ever get was 30 seconds. A normal scan would be closer to a minute. So 30 seconds, that would be with the very best scanning implants and with all scanning skills at level 5. Sudal asks about the player base and how that has influenced the direction. Well, there was a huge change in gameplay when Goon Swarm started playing EVE or came into the 0-0 alliance warfare. Before their time, it had been exclusively high-skilled, both in player skills and in in-game skills, character skills, where these long-range sniper super fits were dominating the game. And then the Goon Swarm came in and just had a tactic of completely overwhelming the opponents to the point that their ability to fly better and fight better was irrelevant. The EVE system, the mechanics, couldn't handle the amount of players, so you couldn't respond fast enough to kill all of them, even though you might, in some cases, have been able to had the server been able to hold. Yes, I was in a battle, a very publicized battle at the time, in JV1V, where goons and their allies brought in close to 1,200 people in a time where 500 people in one system was a lot, straining system. They had the mission of aborting a Titan in construction and simply just kept throwing people at it. Every time one of them died, new ship, go. Simply clogged up the system so much that the defenders had to flee to a pause or die of lag, basically. And at the same time, the growth of the player base is how it influences the gameplay in 0-0 is quite visible in the use of Drake fleets. So the Drake is the embodiment of the low skill point player's dream of a fighting ship. You don't need much skill to fly them. You don't need much player ability to fly them. But if you have enough of them, they are very difficult to kill with correct support. I'm sorry, Galina. I must have missed your question. What was your question? I'll take Tulankor's question in the meantime. Are game mechanics still heavily abused? that depends on what you regard as game mechanics. One of the most abused game mechanic, if you will call it that, is the use of spies and actually hacking and destroying your enemies' comm systems, his forums, and so on. They are good flavor, but I don't always agree with it. And destroying an entire alliance and all their sovereign space simply because you had a spy that could push the button. That isn't good gameplay. Not in my view, at least. It's fun for the spy.
The ultimate James Bond.
Yeah, I'm sure he felt good about it. But the 3,000 people in the alliance he disbanded, I don't think they had much fun. And I don't think the goons in general had much fun about the expansion. If you look past their innate hatred of everything Bob. Okay, bookmarks and such. It's hard for me to say Tool and Core because I have always flown with alliances that not only frowned upon the use of such tactics, but actively prevented its own pilots from doing so. In regards to wormholes and if nullsec is still coveted as before, I haven't seen any large movement of big players, as you say it, into wormhole space. It is very tough to live off of wormhole systems as a large alliance, which is why they still mostly inhabit nullsec. A wormhole is great income for a small corporation of that has maybe 5 to 10 active people on at any time. But once you grow larger than that, you need a large number of systems to enable all of your pilots to earn money every day. And yes, there is moon mining, which is still a huge income. I'm not sure if everyone knows, but moon mining is if you have access to moons with the most sought after resources, is extremely high income. I don't have the math in front of me, but I believe when Pandemic Legion owned one region called Fountain, they had an income of 200 billion ISK per month. That isn't just anything. That's a lot of ISK, and they used it very effectively to build a large fleet of Titans.
This is a mic check.
You're fine. What is the toughest alliance today and the largest? I'm sure you'll hear this a lot in EVE, but in EVE Online there is never one item or one ship or one thing in general that is the best. By members, I'm sure IT Alliance is the largest, and I'm also sure that some would say that they are the toughest. But they are a very good alliance. I won't say anything against them in that regard. But they're very good at what they want to do. That is alliance sovereignty warfare. whereas someone like Pandemic Legion specialized in a different area. But I don't think any of the largest alliances out there would belittle their abilities to PvP. With all the money they gained within their nearly 1 year reign over Fountain, they stored a lot of ISK and made a lot of super capitals. I said the Alliance sovereignty warfare. Owning space. I'm sorry if my accent is bad. Yeah, Talker, that is a very good question, and it used to be all about the resources. Who had access to the good areas of 00 space that actually had the good asteroids? Many of them didn't. And which alliances had access to the daily 1010 plexus? That was huge concern. And that was as well as moon minerals, of course. But these days it's not really about resources, not as it was back then at least. The 1010 plexus have been removed. Every system in 00 space can be upgraded to have all the good asteroids. So everyone actually has access to them. The only thing that's left is space itself and maybe a good moon or two. But then alliance warfare has from the start been about creating a confrontation between your group and another group, which is all about the way EVE is set up to be about the player interaction. Galina, what do you mean by renewing resources? As I see it now, at least, if you assume I know what you mean, there are such an abundance of resources that there's very little to fight about since everybody has access to them. Does that answer your question? I believe if you need something more to fight over, we actually need to reduce the amount of resources available to 00. Constrain movement, constrain the ease of transport, not just of ships, but also of the resources like the jump freighters. As it is now, you can completely, not completely, nothing is completely safe in EVE, almost completely securely move anything and everything from JITA to anywhere in 00 space. No one has to roam around to secure their own space. They just go to the nearest jump bridge and they can be anywhere they want to be. So it is much more safe to move around if you own the space, and it's much easier to move resources to produce whatever you want, wherever you want. And that makes it reduces the incentive to first roam around enemy space for targets in small gangs, and reduces the need for the owners of space to actually defend it. I believe they do, Daryl. I do believe the CCP has an interest in encouraging 00 warfare. They had time and time again. They have uh, made changes, spent a lot of time on expansions with the only focus on 0-0 warfare. Yet they have repeatedly also shown an inability to actually grasp what it means and what their changes actually does to 0-0 warfare. Yes. Divine Shadow asks, in my opinion, what typical roles would a corp choose in 0-0? Territory, resource, PvP. Um, in the old days, there once was an actual desire and a wish from many gamers to actually establish non-PvP alliances. A very good example is ISS, an alliance with the only stated objective to create stations in 0-0 to supply a neutral base of operation for everyone that wanted to use their stations. But as with everything, somebody came and kicked over the sandcastle. The rule of law in 0-0 is if you can't defend it, you can't have it, and that is why many small alliances that go to 0-0 just to have territory or to be able to mine, they have to choose very quickly. Do we want to be a pet or do we want to live in high sec? Once the large alliances find out that you have a sovereignty tower in a system, they will come knocking. They will demand money for your staying in what they perceive as their space, even if it isn't claimed space. If they perceive it as their space, they will charge you. If you don't pay, they will blow your stuff up. Simon Falls asks, what's the difference between Mercenary Coalition and Mossos Mihi? Well, the Mercenary Coalition is a coalition of mercenaries. They fight for who they want, when they want, for the price they want. The history of Mercenary Coalition is extremely exciting to read, and I do think it's out there. If you want me to find it for you, I can get it. But there was a time at the start of the First Great War, or in the middle of it, when the Mercenary Coalition pissed off their landowners. Or what Bob as they perceived themselves to be the Mercenary Coalition's landowners, and they kicked them out of their space. And yeah, a lot of things happened, but the end result was that Mercenary Coalition was disbanded, and it was only restarted in fall of 2010. Mossos Mihi, on the other hand, has been and is and always has been a founding member of what is called the Northern Coalition, and a co-leader of that alliance coalition, I still believe, along with what's it called? Sorry, I can't remember. Blanked out. Race Alliance. Sorry, Race Alliance. if you're interested in checking out the EVE tutorial maps, there is a daily update in the KOT forum. I will give you a link in a second. This is a automatically generated map that draws on information from the EVE database. Yeah, that's the one. I'm just slow. Thank you, Ko. Regarding the power blocks in the current 0.0 environment, I am not entirely sure since I've been out of it for a couple of months. But in general, there are the Northern Coalition, that is everyone in the galactic north. That is, the region is called Tribute, Tenal, Venal, Branch, Declan, Fade, Pureblind, and Cloud Ring. And sometimes Veil of Silent, I'm not sure at the moment about Modesta. Those are the Northern Coalition alliances. In the south, if we look at the southwest, you'll see IT Alliance in control of Delve, Quirius, and Fountain. The other residents of Fountain are, I wouldn't call them pets, but they are IT Alliance allies with their own sovereign space in Fountain. Then we have the Russian bloc on the galactic east. There were originally one alliance called the Red Alliance, but due to some internal disputes I'm not privy to, they split up a couple of years ago and created almost 4 alliances. White Noise, Red Alliance, Red Overlord, XX Death, XX, and so on. They hold all the drone regions, for instance, out in the east. And then there are the initiative. I'm sorry, I'm not sure who they are aligned with these days. Pets there are different kinds of pets, but usually when people say pets, it is a alliance or corporation that pays for the privilege of being in 0.0. It's having their own space to mine and to run plexes in and so on, which is still very rich. I believe you can easily get, if you run Sanctums all day, you can easily get 80 to 100 million ISK an hour. But sometimes a lot of people call alliances that take lead from another big alliance. For instance, IT Alliance is the master of its little coalition, but the guys up in Fountain, Hun, Reloaded, Blade, Blackstar Alliance, and so on, basically do whatever IT Alliance tell them to do. So they are allowed to hold space because of that. So different kind of pets. One pays for the access by actively helping in PvP affairs. The other pays actual ISK. Galina, would you like to rephrase that? I'm not sure what you mean by Moses Mihi's directive. Yeah, that depends on the region. who is the regional overlord and what kind of system it is you're renting. Devil asks, are there any other real-world nations as unified and as powerful as the Russians? I wouldn't actually call the Russians unified. They are different alliances for a reason. There are some serious internal disputes, but they usually, as soon as one of them gets in trouble, they usually can easily be persuaded to setting aside those differences and helping each other. But there are other nations. There was, until recently, a famous French alliance, TCF. There are German alliances like Evoke. And I know pretty much there is an alliance for just about every nation, but none of them as strong on a alliance level as the Russians. Not to my knowledge, at least. Gelnar asked, what is the directive of Moses Mihi? What is the purpose? I'm not sure what the question is, but to answer that question, fun. Have fun, shoot people. They don't, as most alliances, they don't have a special, I want to conquer the whole of Eve. Not like that. Tulan asks if big alliances take NPC 00 as their own space. No, they don't. Not as such, not big alliances. But it is a very important nursery for small and medium alliances to get their internal organization in order, get reliable fleets operating, and getting a good cooperation between their own pilots to enable them to get into sovereignty space. There's also the problem that NPC 00 can't be upgraded. So compared to sovereign space, it is somewhat poor. If I had to name one American corp, it would probably be Goonswarm, which was mainly American, but there was it was a very large alliance, so of course they had other nations among them. But yes, they were based on the Something Awful forums. Yes. Okay. Any other questions before I leave? Okay, 1 second. Simon asks, generally speaking, do big alliances require a high amount of game time? That depends very much on the alliance and what it is it does, and what you as a pilot do in it. Some alliances can require as little as no time online. 2, you have to be online for every single mission that is called via the forum or in-game events. Some people spend upwards of 10-15 hours a day playing EVE. But that isn't always required, and that isn't always needed. But they do all require you to, if it is a 0-0 based alliance in sovereignty space, they do require you to actually be online a couple of hours, at least a week, at very, very least, and that you do show up for corporate events of fleets, mining ops, if there's alliance that would allow you to mine, and so on. Divine Shadow asks, what would be a good game plan for a corp to become wealthy and powerful? I think I would need a couple of hours to go over that little question. But I can't. There are a number of very good articles on. 1 second, I'll find it. A former Goonswarm CEO, I believe he was. At least he was the head of intelligence in Goonswarm. Writes a very good series of articles over on 10-ton hammer. Sins of a Solar Spymaster is the series. Yes. There are some very, very good articles on how to start a corp, how to focus your corp, and what and the internal setups of a corp to keep it going. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you everyone for a very nice class. This is my first class, and I am awesome. Please send any comments you have in a email to me. I would be very interested to hear any comments and suggestions for future classes. I am holding a class next Sunday on the Capital Ships 101.